capacity numbers based on the HVAC system. And that's this room. Prior to COVID, there would be 20, 25 people in here. And I would have 3 or 4 sitting behind me in the windowsill. And by 3 o'clock, the oxygen in the room was gone. So we're trying to, but the press has issued a statement that we cannot put any limits on how many of them can come into the room. So we are trying to treat everybody the same.
Understood.
So the brave new world of post-COVID, welcome. It is always good. I'm Ann Cummings, I'm the chair of the committee. I've been here forever, not as long as captive insurance has been with Vermont, but I've chaired this committee for quite a while. And it's always good to have a group come in here that is happy with us. So it's good to see you. Maybe we'll go around. Keisha, do you want to introduce yourselves? And
Senator Keisha Robinson-Still from Chittenden County, Southeast.
we have new districts.
Yeah.
Clockwise. I'm Senator Dick McCormick from Windsor County, and I served in this committee years ago. And hearing from captive insurance is always nice because you're happy citizens.
And I'm Senator Randy Brock. I'm from Franklin County and part of Grand Island County, which is up in the northwest corner of the state border.
I'm Chittenden, representing Chittenden Southeast. I'm very new to this committee and a lot of these topics, so I'm definitely looking for advice on how to get educated.
Mark McDonald, I represent Orange County. We have only one traffic light.
There's going to be a special assessment to put a third light in your district.
Is that in Bradford?
Yes. All 4 corners, right turn on that.
I have stopped at that.
I have almost been stopped by his sheriff that sits in the Randolph blinking red light. Okay, welcome. The floor is yours. Jamie, do you have any introductory remarks? I know you were in the other day.
I don't, Madam Chair, other than it's been my pleasure to work with the Captive Insurance Association for 20+ years. And you'll hear more than I can share today from these experts and folks. Thank you.
Okay, floor is yours.
Great, thank you. So my name is Kevin Mead, resident of Newport, also on the Canadian border. When I go to my doctor's office, the phone says, "Welcome to Canada." I'm president of the Vermont Captive Insurance Association, the VCIA, a position I've held for about 10 months now. Those of you with history on the committee might remember my predecessor, Rich Smith, and I took over from Rich about 11 months ago. So first of all, I'd like to thank the chair and all of you for granting us some time in your busy schedules here as a committee. My role is to provide an introduction or potentially a reintroduction to the rather esoteric world of captive insurance, talk about Vermont's global position within captives, and to address some of the issues that we see facing the industry today. Yesterday, we sent over to you an emailed fact sheet on the VCIA and the captive insurance industry. Hopefully you have that. If not, I have some copies here, and I'll have some copies available at the leadership meetings that we're having over at the, yes, thank you, Pavilion building later on. Joining me are 2 VCIA members that you'll hear from shortly. The current VCIA chair, Tracy Hassett, off to my left here. She's going to provide some issues, some insight on a business issue they were facing in her organization and why they came to Vermont in search of a solution. And then the chair of the VCIA's legislative committee, Ben Gould, to her left, will discuss legislation for captives in Vermont and what the legislative committee does. I realize that a housekeeping bill is, I think, coming before this committee with amendments.
Yes, we get one every year.
Yeah.
And it usually comes very quickly. So we're waiting for it.
Good. And the moment that reappears, we're at your disposal to potentially discuss that going forwards. I'm thinking that some of you have probably said, what on earth is captive insurance when you saw this on the docket? And for others, It's a revision, so apologies for going back a little bit to the start, but we can't talk about captive insurance without first talking about risk. Corporations, non-profits, public entities, they put assets at risk when they conduct activities. Risk managers in those organizations then seek to control that exposure by doing things like imposing standards, conducting training or research, and benchmarking their best practices against other organizations. It's also their job to procure insurance to help manage that risk. But what do they do if that insurance is too expensive or is unavailable? And how do they then address that within that marketplace? And so in those instances, a captive insurance solution may be explored. A captive insurance entity, at its most basic, is a wholly owned subsidiary of the parent organization that then purchases captive insurance for that coverage. It's licensed and regulated at the state level, as all insurance is, and Vermont, due to its long-standing expertise here, is a world leader in this. You'll hear from Tracy in a moment as to why Vermont was the choice for her organisation, but in general, the reasons for that choice are that Vermont is the gold standard. That gold standard is based on three things, realistically: professionalism, infrastructure, and known and understood regulations from approachable regulators. And lo and behold, as if on cue, the approachable regulator appears in the room.
I decided that there is room for him because I don't. This is becoming.
Randy and I were just saying it's musical chairs. When the music stops,
That's exactly what this is,
When
and
people come in, we start to leave.
it's, it's regulation.
So the VCIA is the largest captive insurance association in the world, with over 400 members representing thousands of people. Our members are as diverse as a Fortune 50 company, such as Disney or Verizon, to small non-profit hospitals and housing associations. We also represent the many service providers that form that infrastructure that I discussed. VCIA's role is to provide advocacy leadership by appearing at events such as this, opportunities for information sharing, and a network of mutual support to enhance the captive industry and the Vermont captive community. With imitation being the sincerest form of flattery, thanks to my fellow Irishman Oscar Wilde for that quote, it's important to note that the VCIA's efforts, together with those of the DED and the DFR, are routinely used as examples for effectiveness for our competitors. Or, perhaps put less charitably, people steal shamelessly. This year, we returned to an in-person annual conference here in Vermont for the first time since 2019, and had over nearly 1,000 attendees come attend from all over the world. And it's the country's largest captive insurance conference across the whole US. The state folks will report to you on the growth of captive formations and of already established captives in Vermont. And while that bodes well, I do need to address some headwinds that exist for the industry with you. The first is the workforce. In common with every other sector in Vermont and countrywide, we face demographic issues in the workforce. The workforce is aging and there are expanding career opportunities available for new graduates. So that, coupled with the pandemic, has led to outsourcing and out-of-stating, where the work that infrastructure provides might no longer be actually provided by professionals in Vermont. So that's one of the issues we're facing. Competition, as I mentioned, those other jurisdictions, they see frankly, the financial performance and the benefits of the captive industry to the state of Vermont and wish to replicate that. And then finally, the marketplace. It's a dynamic marketplace. And while we're currently in what they call a hard market, which is where traditional insurance coverage is increasing in cost or decreasing in availability, and that bodes well for captives. Those market conditions are going out. You'll be perhaps unsurprised that the BCIA, together with our industry, regulatory and economic development partners, have initiatives to develop to address all of those. So the reasons for our optimism, and we are optimistic about this industry, are that Vermont's success can't be easily duplicated. We have the strongest captive regulators in the world, without debate. We have knowledgeable and supportive policymakers in Vermont's General Assembly and also in the Governor's office. That cannot be disputed. Burlington is a centre of excellence with those service providers that I mentioned before, forming that infrastructure. So before I pass over to our board and legislative chairs, I would like to just issue the final note, which is this year, like every year, as you mentioned, Madam Chair, we are coming before you with a captive bill, and we look forward to having that in front of you and having the ability to present that to you with our friends at the DFR and the DED. And we know that every year we come with that, we'll listen to very carefully and question very closely, but given a very full and fair hearing in front of this committee and in front of your colleagues in the House. So without further ado, I'm going to be quiet because that was kind of dull, but Tracy is beyond not dull, and Tracy will tell you how she solved her problem here in Vermont. So,
Wow,
Tracy.
no pressure with that.
Yeah, that's
Over
why
to
I
you.
read it.
Well, I will admit that 15 years ago, I did not know what a captive was. And I sit here today with an enormous amount of passion about the entire industry and what we're doing. So thank you first for allowing us to be here today. But more than that, thank you for supporting what we do. My background, I am a recovering HR professional. Although you never recover from human resources, I can tell you that. I spent most of my career in higher ed. I was the Chief Human Resources Officer at Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Worcester, Mass. And back in 2008, we realized we had a very big problem. And the problem was actually twofold. The problem was the rising cost of a college education. So as a parent who put 3 children through college, I can attest to the fact that college is expensive. As a college administrator, we were seeing the cost of faculty and staff healthcare rising at double-digit rates year over year over year. And to be able to maintain the workforce that we had, to be able to keep tuition affordable, we knew that we had to solve a problem. We weren't quite sure what to do or how to do it. So we actually partnered together with several other schools in the Boston area. And we all said, how can we come together to bring healthcare costs down? And we hired a consultant, and the consultant walked us through a variety of options and kept coming back to captive insurance. So I will admit, I had no idea what it was, and I will admit that the term captive insurance scared me to death. Turns out, in plain language, captive insurance is an insurance company created for and owned by its members. I wish it had a different name, but what I can say is they are extremely effective. So fast forward to the identification of the problem in 2008. In 2012, we created a medical stop loss captive domiciled here in the state of Vermont. And I'll talk in a minute about why Vermont. We started with 6 colleges and universities, and that was in 2013. They were all in Massachusetts. And over time, We have now grown to 25 colleges, universities, and secondary schools, and we continue to grow. Over what is going to be our 10-year anniversary in July, we have saved the colleges and universities $125 million as a direct result of forming our captive. So when we think about that, and as someone who put children through college, as someone who worked at a college, that's a lot of money. And that's a lot of money that can help students, help families who are paying to put their kids through school. It also helps the faculty and staff who are working and are trying to pay their bills and pay for their groceries. We've brought the health insurance costs down as a result of having a captive. So why Vermont? First and foremost, location. So our schools were at the time just in Massachusetts. And while we were presented with a variety of states, I will happily say that our consultants who have been in the captive industry for years said to us, there is no better captive domicile than Vermont. So we'd like to bring you to Vermont to meet with some service providers. We all came up to Vermont. We spent 3 days in Burlington, and we were educated. We were impressed. We were just covered in information and ideas. And it was one of the most fascinating times of my entire life. Never did I think I would get excited about insurance. Oh my gosh, did I get excited about insurance. The other thing that made it so incredibly worthwhile to domicile our captive in Vermont, we had direct access to the regulators. So when we started talking about forming our captive, and there are so many different types of captives. So there's medical stop loss, there's property, there's casualty, there's so many different types. We had a lot of questions because it was a group of not-for-profit institutions coming together, and they were going to own their own insurance company. We wanted to make sure that we understood how and why. I will tell you that Sandy Bigglestone and her predecessor, Dave Provost from the DFR, came to a meeting, sat with us, and talked about what our options were. I will tell you that that does not happen in other states. The fact that we had access to the regulators and that they helped us, gave us ideas on how to create the captive, it was amazing. In my mind, it was a no-brainer. The flexibility of the state of Vermont in terms of helping captive owners and listening to our needs and helping us to make things better for our industry, for other captive owners like myself. This is my 4th year as a board member on the Vermont Captive Insurance Association. I am the board chair this year. It is an incredible honor, and I have now attended the VCIA conference for 8 years. So it's minus the 2 that none of us left our house. And it is absolutely remarkable. The slogan of the conference is where the captive world comes to meet, and it's true. And I don't know if any of you have ever had the opportunity to come to the captive conference in Vermont, in Burlington, in August. If you haven't, we'd love to have you. It's fascinating. It's also an opportunity for networking, for doing business, for learning about all of the business partners that are available here in Vermont. The 25 colleges and universities who own our captive are thrilled that they have an insurance company that is located so close to them, and a state that is so supportive, and a state that is helping them to learn how to do things better. What I'll add is what captive insurance has done for our organization, more than save money for them, is to actually help them create a healthier faculty and staff. And part of that is the transparency that owning your own insurance company provides. So faculty and staff at these colleges and universities now have a better understanding about healthcare. They understand more about the choices that they make and how they impact them. And we're helping them to make better decisions and to make this entire process more transparent. So with that, I will close by saying we are currently looking at expanding our captive and potentially adding other lines of coverage. Our schools have said to us, we're doing so well. What else can we do to come together to collaborate to solve other problems that we're experiencing in this hard market that Kevin shared? And we're looking forward to doing that here in the state of Vermont.
Thank you. We have a hard stop at 2 because the Rand Corporation is zooming in to go over a childcare study with us. So Ben, I'm gonna have you come up.
Sure.
And we can push the Rand Corporation a little bit. They
I
might.
doubt my remarks will take very long
Okay.
anyway.
And if you have issues that need to be dealt with, I think we'll hear from you some more.
Yes, all right. Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you so much for having me here. Certainly I've sat in on this session many years in the past, at least in the pre-COVID days before we were all doing this via Zoom. It's my first opportunity to testify before this committee, and I'm honored to be here today. I speak in my capacity as chairman of the Vermont Captive Insurance Association's Legislative Committee. It's a volunteer position. My day job is that I'm an attorney at the law firm of Paul Frank and Collins in Burlington, resident of South Burlington. The Legislative Committee is a group of about 40 members of the VCIA. Certainly a number of captive insurance attorneys are on that committee, but also representatives of captive insurance management firms, accounting and actuarial firms that work with captives, and even some representatives of companies that own their own captives. We convene monthly in order to monitor ongoing legislation and other initiatives that could have other regulatory initiatives that could have an effect on captive insurance on the federal level, as well as with respect to the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, and first and foremost, of course, here in the state of Vermont. One of the other principal objectives of the Legislative Committee is to look at our captive insurance statute every single year and decide whether or not it's still competitive, whether it's still responsive to the needs of the industry, or if there are changes that can be made. When the Captive Insurance Act was first adopted back in the early 1980s, it truly was a partnership between the legislature and the industry and the administration. There's a famous picture of the bill signing for that first captive insurance statute, and you see there as part of the party are now junior U.S. Senator Peter Welch, along with other legislative leaders. Vermont was not the first domicile to be created, but it was the first willing to commit resources to captive insurance and make sure it was a success. Over the course of the ensuing decades, we've seen a huge benefit to the state in the form of tax revenues, in the form of workforce development, and certainly in the form of tourism, as all captives are required to hold an annual meeting, at least one annual meeting of the board here in the state of Vermont. So very typically in the fall, leaf peeping season, of course, we see a number of clients coming to the state and availing themselves of the hotels and the other tourist infrastructure here in Vermont while they do their meeting. The partnership from back in 1981 continues. It truly is a three-legged stool: legislature, regulator, and industry working together. Captive insurance was initially a solution for the, for large industrial companies, the Fortune 100, the Fortune 500. And as the years go on, that has evolved into a solution for middle market companies, even companies that don't have the financial capacity to set up their own captive insurance company can now place their risks in what's called a protective cell within the framework of a larger captive. Captives have become ever more sophisticated over the years, and as a result, the DCIA looks at the statute every single year to make sure it's doing the job that it's supposed to do. We start each year in the fall or even the late summer, canvassing the members of the DCIA as well as folks at the Department of Financial Regulation to come up with a consensus bill. Truly want to reiterate that it is a collaborative process. We are all working together and working to find a solution that responds to the needs of the industry without undermining the regulatory strength of the Vermont domicile. We are seeing a lot of competition from other states. I think we're up to about 40 states in the US that have captive domiciles, including as well as a number of offshore jurisdictions in the Caribbean and in Europe. So the competition is the competition out there is fierce. You heard from Tracy and Kevin, though, that Vermont has managed to maintain its regulatory strength during the course of, in the face of this increased competition, but the battle never ends. The wolves are always out there chomping at the door, and we have to respond to make sure Vermont stays competitive. So in the coming weeks, you'll be presented with a captive housekeeping bill. We bring one to the legislature every year. That there's always something that needs to be tweaked. As a mature domicile, we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're really looking for incremental changes to keep Vermont strong, to keep Vermont on the forefront. And certainly want to thank you in advance for listening to the folks in the DFR who are going to come to present, and appreciate your continued partnership in making sure Vermont remains the gold standard for captive insurance.
Thank you. And right on time. That was perfect. We look forward to seeing the bill. It's a pleasure to work with you. This is one of the most uplifting days. You're one of the few groups of people who come in here who actually like us.
And we do.
So it is always a pleasure to have you, and I usually present that bill, so I am looking forward to learning more.
It's coming your way.
Good.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And enjoy. This is not our best weather. This is not Vermont. This is more like Boston or Worcester weather.
I feel right at home.
Yeah. So, but I guess the end of the week, we might get snow. You're getting it or Easter. And we're getting part of it.
Oh.
At least that's what they say now. Maybe you're getting rain and we're getting snow. But we're looking for snow.
Oh, and I'll send it your way if we get
So
it.
all those people from Boston can come up here and ski on President's Weekend.
Yes. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to repeat our invite to come join us in the Pavilion building later on today.
Okay,
3:30 to 4:30.
okay, we will probably still be in committee, but if everybody's good, we'll get out of here on time. So just make it.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.